Hello and welcome to all my fantastic 5th grade artists, and welcome to all parents who are watching at home as well. This week guys, this is our last lesson on our selfie portrait drawing. So what I'm going to do today with you guys is to show you how we use shading in our portrait and how we're going to apply colour to our portrait, and then we're going to have our finished portraits. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to show you the steps that we take for the beginning of our shading, and then I'm going to show you how we use the colours to bring out the objects properly and to show the light and the dark. At the beginning of the lesson guys, just make sure that you've got your selfie drawing ready. You've got your pencils, pens, whatever you're going to do your drawing with. If you have colouring pencils, that's the most ideal tool for today. So if you've got colouring pencils like me, I've got mine all arranged in the pencil case. If, however, you don't have any colouring pencils and you have chalk pastels or oil pastels, that's also fine. You'll just have to try and adapt the way that I use the shading. You just have to use your pastels very lightly. So not pressing very hard, but pressing very lightly. If you don't have any of those at all, it's also fine for you guys to use watercolour, any paints that you have. If you don't have colouring pencils, or if you only have pencil or pen, that's also fine, and you just will have to do your drawing monochrome without any colour, and that's completely fine. Remember, it's just using the materials that you have at home, but our first choice today would be colouring pencils. Okay guys, so what we're going to do now then is we're going to look at our objects that we used for our collage, and we're going to look at which colours we need. We're going to identify the different colours, and that's really important before we start our drawing, is to get all our colours ready. Okay guys, first things first, you're going to go back to your collage now that you've made on your computer, and you should have, just like me, a collection of images, a digital collage on your computer, on a Word document or a Google Docs, however you want to do it, that's fine. And what you need to do now is look at each individual photo that you've got and you need to think, which colours am I going to choose? So, for instance, let's have a look at the Game Boy. With the Game Boy, we know that we've got a purpley pink, purpley grey colour in the middle surrounding the screen. So I'm going to choose a kind of purpley grey colour. I'm just going to try and match as many colours that I've got in my pencil case to the photo. I know for my outside it's a very light grey, so I'm going to select a light grey like this. And then I also know that I've got my cross pad, so I need to select quite a dark grey. So if you don't have a really dark grey, what you need to do is you need to use the same grey that you've got, but you just need to press a little bit darker. Now I think I do have a darker grey. So I've got two different, I'm just going to show you, I've got two different greys here, and you can test before you start to draw which one is the darker of the two. So it's always just trying to match the darkest colours and the lightest colours to the ones that you can see on the screen. So just in that Game Boy, we can see that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different colours. And so that most of that is probably about 5 different shades of grey that you need to find. A lightish green, so if you've got a light green, and also a kind of pinky purple kind of colour for the buttons. And I think that this purple that I've selected for the outside, I think this is going to be too dark for the buttons. So I'm going to go back into my pencil case and I'm going to have a look at what I've got. and I've got something like this, and I think this colour is a really good match for those buttons there. If, guys, you don't have a really big selection of colours, that's completely fine. Stick to your primary colours, and what you do is you use your shading very lightly, and then if you need to go over for darker colours, generally what you're going to do is you're going to use your blue. So if you've only got say one grey like this, and it's the only grey you've got, what you can do to make a variety out of your grey is you use your grey in different grades. So sometimes you'll be shading very, very darkly, so pressing on the paper really, really, really hard. Sometimes you'll be using it really softly. So what you need to do is make sure that once you've done that, if you need to do another shade of grey, you can use blue. Once you've matched all the colours that you need, guys, once you've got them all ready in front of you, now you know exactly what you're going to use when you start to shade. So what you can do now is you can just watch my demonstration, and you can do the same with your colours. Okay, guys, next step now is to have your drawing out in front of you. You've still got your laptop, so you can see all the images that you need. And what I've done is I've zoomed in on my laptop into the Game Boy photo, so I've got it really, really large on my screen. So it's almost the same size as my drawing. Now this is really going to help me when it comes to the shading. So the first thing we're going to start with, guys, I'm going to start from the very center of the Game Boy, and I'm going to use that green that I could see for the screen of the Game Boy. So this is quite an old Game Boy, so it had this kind of light green color. And I take my pencil in my hand just like this, and I start a really light shade across the screen. So just using, I'm not pressing hard at all. If I was pressing hard, I would go closer to the lead. But right now, I just want a really light shade, so I can hold it a bit further down, so I can move the pencil more like that across, okay? Okay, once you're happy with your screen, you can go back to the photo, and what I can actually see in the photo of my Game Boy is that there's a shadow running along the outside, so the border where we have the rest of the Game Boy and the screen, and this will actually show us that there is a bit of depth in our drawing. And we can see, because if we know there's a shadow, it means that there must be two layers, which are one is taller than the other, so one's higher. So we know that the screen is lower down than the rest of the Game Boy, the body of the case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brown color, and I'm going to go along the outside, or along the edge, and this is going to start to give the appearance of shadow on my Game Boy. And then I can add some darker colors as well. So I might just overlap the brown slightly, because you've got a very soft shadow actually from the Game Boy. Okay. And now I'm going to use quite a dark blue for the outside. One nice line, one line going up, all the line that I can see. And you can start to see, guys, that I've created this illusion of there being shadow in my drawing. And I'm just starting to blend. I'm going back and I'm looking, and I'm blending that brown with my green. So you can start to create more shadow by using that technique of using a very soft, similar color. So this brown is quite a similar shade to my green. It's not too dark. And then I use a really dark blue to outline the entire Game Boy. And what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to outline the Game Boy in this blue, and it will give it a really prominent outline that will contrast with the rest of the drawing. Okay, so once we're at that stage, guys, what I'm going to start to do now is I'm going to look at my shades of grey for my drawing. I know that the front of my Game Boy, the body of the Game Boy, this is going to be the lightest colour of grey. I know that underneath, so this is the underneath and this is the side, there's going to be shadow on the underneath and the side because the light is shining onto our Game Boy. You can look at any surface, like if you have a Game Boy or a laptop, you can see that if you just look at my laptop, the light is coming down onto the surface, and the side and the underneath, there's shadow. So this is a kind of light grey silver, and this is a kind of a dark grey silver. So it's going to be exactly the same in our Game Boy. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our grey on top and on the side, and then what we're going to do is we're going to make the sides much darker. Okay? So what we're going to do now is use that really light grey and get the lightest shade and lightest tone of grey into our drawing. Okay, so you can now see that I've applied a really light grey to my Game Boy, and I'm ready now to start to add the darker shade to the underside and the side. Now, what you can do, you can take the same grey that you were using and you can shade just a little bit darker. So I'll just show you now. I now just take and I just press even darker, even more. I'm pressing really hard onto the page, and you see now I'm creating that dark contrast. Or what you can do is you can go for another shade of grey that you have, if you do have that. And this one is slightly darker than my original one. So it'll be a different tone though. So it's up to you. You can see now that I'm creating a really dark grey shadow. And now because I've got that dark blue line underneath, I'm starting to create the sense of this being 3D now. I'm getting that really interesting 3D shape going on. Okay, now I'm starting to be really happy with how my Game Boy is coming out now, and I think it's looking like a really interesting part of the drawing. It's starting to look really 3D. The last thing you want to do is to add the separate colours onto this object, and then around the object, the things that are touching the Game Boy, you also want to add a dark outline to them, so you start to get the contrast and you don't get lost in the shading, so you know where to shade and where to stop shading. Okay guys, now we've got that outline, you can see how our objects are really standing out against one another and they're creating that illusion of the 3D. I'm going to show you just applying now our shade to the buttons here. It's really simple. I'm using my pencil, this kind of motion, and I'm creating a kind of circle. I'm just leaving in the very middle a little bit of light, a little bit of white, and I'm just around the edge. I'm going over very softly but making it slightly darker. And this is because it's again showing us the 3D nature of these objects. On the 2D, we're drawing onto a flat surface, but we want to create this 3D effect. And if it's too obvious, the way we've used a very light and then a very dark, it's not going to look quite right. But if we use a very soft way of shading and get to the very middle, just to very light strokes, then we're going to be creating quite a realistic look to our pieces. What you want to do when you're creating your shadow is you want to follow the shadow that you've created on your other objects. So I've got shadow going along this edge, so I know that I've got shadow going along this edge, shadow going along this edge. So I'm not going to have my darkest areas up here. My darkest areas are going to be down here, down on the bottom right, because it's the bottom right in these areas where I've got the shade. So again, the shade is going to be around here. And again, you can go back to your photo, your object, and you can look and you can see now I've created my 3D effect. And then guys, you can apply this to each part of your object. And you're going to create this really interesting illusion and kind of break away from our realistic drawing and then our kind of imaginary world, what's going on inside our heads. So let's have a look at how it looks all coloured.